Good morning, everybody. We have a few more people here in the auditório Cedas, Abide Cedas, and welcome also to people following online. It is my privilege to be the moderating and opening the session this morning of the project Abide and the seminar called Invisible Animals, Exploring Narratives and Counter-Narratives of Wildfires. My name is Margarida Fernandes. I'm a biologist and anthropologist. I have the privilege of being part of the scientific advisory board of this project. And this morning, we will have the presentations of the Abide team. Kwai Shen, Filipa Soares, and Verónica Policarpo will talk about the Portuguese case study, which is one of the sites that this project studies among other countries. And we will have hopefully 20-minute presentation of these researchers, and then we'll have hopefully some questions from online and in the room, a discussion, and at 11 o'clock we will go for coffee break. So, good session. Thank you. Kwai.
Thank you, Margarita. I hope that the sound, and I apologize, the sound is working now, and as well as the projection, and I apologize to the online audience, mostly for the inconvenience, as these things sometimes happen. So we will be presenting, as you can see already on the screen, the work we've been doing together with Filipa and Veronica, and I want to also start saying that Nuno as well, who was part of the team, I wanted to include him as well, not present at this time, but he was also a key member that helped us in the placement of some of the visual methods, in the visual methodology of using camera traps. So just a shout out to him. And we begin by prompting this very important and intriguing question: how can multispecies data challenge mainstream narratives about wildfires, based on the insights of the Portuguese case in Serra da Estrela? So let me begin by saying that rather than offering a straightforward answer to this question, we will articulate potential approximations based on the two non-intrusive methods that I will touch upon, which are the employment or deployment in the field of trail cameras and ecoacoustic recorders. We are deploying these methods on the burnt grounds of Serra da Estrela to register audiovisual data, following an ecological inquiry around recovery, which is led by grounded imaginaries. Our work is focalized on aligning the images and sounds we register through these methods as much as possible to animals' perspectives, their ecological adaptations in relation to fire regimes, and the human factors exerting pressure on them, including the mainstream narratives coloring their environments. Serra da Estrela is a mountainous region located slightly north of the center of Portugal, about 100 kilometers long and 30 kilometers wide. This national park was formed from a huge granite ridge which shaped the geological southern frontier of the country ages ago. In recent times, in 2017 and 2022, this alpine region sustained intense wildfires. And you can see here a map showing the 2022 extent of the wildfire, colored in red-yellow. And outlined in dark red, you can see what is called in Portuguese freguesias, the municipalities. These are the 6 municipalities chosen for our study site in Serra da Estrela, because Serra da Estrela is quite wide, big, it's a big area. And these, as you can see, were carpeted by the 2022 fires. And you can see also in that complex map, you can see the part of the strategy to place, that help us place the camera, which is called, it's a grid of 2 by 2 kilometers. And this is part of the methodology of placing the camera, the trail cameras. You can see also names and icons of the diverse locations that we've chosen across these freguesias. Of course, the names were arbitrarily chosen for us to follow up when we collect the cameras, the data basically, to back them up and to analyze the images through the camera process of that we use, and as well as other placements with the coordinates that you can see with the numbers, the latitude and longitude, for the ecoacoustic recording devices that we also place. I will talk a bit more about that in the following slides. So the 6 freguesias or municipalities are Famalicão, Valelhas, Valdeamoreira, Sameiro, Folgosinho, and Verdelhos. So this is our Portuguese study site, and this is the place where things occur in a different spectrum of light and sound than the one we humans usually tend to fall or tend to be enamored with when we color the disasters that comes after the fires, and the drama and the mourning that comes after fires. There are different colors that appear, and for this I want to begin, as you see in the images. I decided to combine this picture that I took in Cerro de Estrela with this inlet of the short fiction story, horror story of H.P. Lovecraft, The Color Out of Space. The alkalinity of soils across the burned territory increased after the 2022 fires and transmogrified the vegetation in Cerro de Estrela. Notably, the change in colors of a burned landscape is the most prominent visual mark left behind. Observable to the human eyes, a remnant spectrum of fire radiation still pulsates in the form of light waves, the black, charred, and carbonized colors, and sound waves which we cannot perceive. Whilst active fires appear to human beholders in the typical gradients from reds to yellows, blues, and whites, the methods we are employing could lead us to imagine other experiences through the animal's perspective. The photographs I took on the right of Cerro de Estrela shows that particular spectral artifact produced by the lens of any camera when sun rays reflect the world at the right angle, the red, green, and blue wavelengths and the color gradients in between that humans perceive as the rainbow. That image reminded me of H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space. Lovecraft's horror story talks about a meteorite crash after which vegetation and animals mutate, humans are driven mad, and unspeakable colors begin manifesting a spectrum of energies never seen before. Color is a sensation. Color is fundamentally subjective. The photoreceptors in human retinas detect a restrictive range of wavelengths of light, and our brains use these signals to construct the sensation of color. However, there are so many eyes and myriad forms of seeing on this planet that it would be fair to say that there are different sensations of color, distinctive to the species beholding nature. An invisible spectrum appears in my mind, and I wonder what other colors and sounds do disasters and resilience produce. Let me offer a couple of other storytelling masterpieces to entertain that question. Bernard Werber wrote a fiction novel, French writer, a fiction novel in 1991 about the secluded scientists who studied obsessively ant communication and experimented with machines that could decode the ant language. The novel was called Les Fourmis. Towards the end of that story, assuming the perspective of a group of ants which venture into the laboratory cellar of the scientists, he conveys a compelling vision of one ant experiencing the presence of humans. I quote, "The edge of the world is black. She has never seen anything so black before. It is hard, smooth, lukewarm, and smells of mineral oil. For a long time, she tries to understand what is going on. From time to time, a vibration can be felt. Its intensity increases exponentially. This noise, this wind, this vibration, these are them, the guardians of the edge of the world, who kill everything that tries to penetrate the black earth. They don't even know what category of living beings they belong to. Are they giant insects, birds, plants? They only know that they are incredibly fast and incredibly strong, a force that is almost incomprehensible and exceeds everything known, end quote. The great majority of ants are actually blind, and the ones who can see have very poor vision. Those that can see are trichromats. Their photoreceptive cells are sensitive to 3 colors, just like humans are trichromats too. But while we can see the shades between red, green, and blue, ants perceive a color palette of green, blue, and ultraviolet. Ants cannot see red, humans cannot see ultraviolet. Depending on vision faculties, the electromagnetic spectrum of light on Earth manifests differently. Imagine ants possess an invertebrate language humans can translate, which arguably they do possess a language, which is multisensorial language. Their glands secrete chemical compounds, some of their organs produce vibrations, their antennae and tarsi of their feet enact tactile communication. The short story you see here, or the quote of part of the short story of Ursula Le Guin, takes that leap in imagining an ant language written by touch gland exudations on ungerminated seeds, rather than the prominent vision most mammals, including us on planet Earth, are prone to be drawn to experience phenomena. These 3 different stories that I mentioned help me devise and place myself on the grounds of Cerro de Estrella with the camera methods of placing the camera, the trail cameras, to try to imagine what they capture from the other side of the lens, that is from the eyes of the animal. While this could be very speculative, it helps a lot. It helps to promote this creativity in the way we can analyze images and the typical biodiversity monitoring techniques employed for that, but with a different lens and with a different intention. Since eyes define nature's palette, as Ed Young asserts in his An Immense World of 2022, I invite you to ponder what more than human colors fire could show when seen through animals' eyes. The heightened night vision of a genet let me go back if I can go back. The heightened night vision of a genet, geneta, might give us a hint. A successfully introduced non-feline carnivore, which has probably seen many human conflicts throughout the history of the Iberian Peninsula. Native from northern Africa, it has been pondered it could have been introduced during the Arab times as a semi-domestic animal that went wild. Genets' eyes have a tissue called tapetum lucidum, or tapetum lucidum, sitting behind the retinas, which reflects light waves passing through their photoreceptors. This retro-reflection is evident in a night drive, during a headlight encounter, or in the pictures taken of many nocturnal animals. The tapetum lucidum is an iridescent layer in the eyes of animals like the genet, which enable them a superior vision, or through the eyes of Sus scrofa, for example, the wild boar, which has been successfully adapted to the different Anthropocene times that we have experienced in recent times. And it's been part of the biomes in all across Europe since the earliest Pleistocene, becoming one of the widest ranges mammals on the northern hemisphere. The wild boar also possesses a tapetum layer, and it is an antagonistic figure all over Cerro de Estrella, and together with the genet, their anthropocentric characterizations play a huge role in the counter-narratives we are trying to develop. Moved by this and by what Danny Sellermeyer calls grounded imaginaries, we are experimenting with alternative forms of storytelling that are informed by ecoacoustics as well as the trail camera methods I already mentioned. Methods that are established in the field of ecology monitoring, but which in the ABIDE project are repurposed creatively. The data collected is evaluated with a different mindset to engage in a narrative form that weaves images and sounds from the fire-fertilized grounds of Serra da Estrela, accounting for the perspectives of the local people that entangle the animals and vegetation in a pyro-diverse experience. The scars left behind by the fires conceal stories bound to different ecological contingencies, human-animal relations, and distinctive kinds of fuels, the pyro-resistant and pyrophilic vegetations. Several deciduous trees were completely burned. However, the charcoal burnout first impression is deceiving. New branches from the buttress of a burned stump of Quercus pyrenaica in Valellas were greeting the sunlight of a new day. A common response of pyrenaica oaks after the fires consists of producing shoots using underground stored nutrients. The name Quercus pyrenaica symbolically points to the Pyrenees, but it could also relate to the pyre, from the Pyrenaica word pyre, which in ancient times perhaps was mainly fueled by this hard, long-burning wood. Its ground-borne spectrum, as I call the acoustic energy which the burnt stump transmitted, sounds like this. Hopefully you can hear it. Maybe we can turn a bit up the volume. It's quite low. I don't know if it's playing back.
Is it like a bass sound, or is it supposed to sound like crickets?
No, it's a very low sound, but I don't hear it. I can play it back later when I stop. So based on this, we employ selective recording devices to capture these sounds. Specialized transducers and contact microphones, some of which you are seeing now, and particularly piezoelectric microphones. With these special microphones, we are able to record not only airborne sounds, the ones we are used to, the crackling of the frames, for instance, but sounds that are entirely substrate-borne, vibrations. And in that way, we could run broader ecoacoustic analysis that involves sonic forms of expression by vertebrates, invertebrates, and also geological processes. Hopefully now you can hear. I will play back 4 examples of 4 different locations, 4 different coordinates in Serra da Estrela, namely in Manteigas, Ameiros, and Verdelhos, and Val da Moreira. I do apologize because the sound doesn't really play back truly. For instance, in this last one, the bees buzzing. but this is basically spectrograms, that it's part of the visualization of colorful visualization of the acoustic energy from the files and the sounds that we've been collecting with these devices through the microphones already showed, particularly with the passive acoustic monitoring device, which is the AudioMod. And as you can see, just visually, without getting much into detail, the spectrograms show the different colors translated as the amplitude or intensities of the frequencies emitted, the sounds emitted by the different species that we managed to identify, or taxonomic groups we haven't found. I will show a little bit, I will speed up a little bit, because my colleagues come afterwards with also the second part of the presentation. Excuse me? The energy of this sound recording was visualized using spectrograms, which is basically a visual representation of the signal's frequencies and amplitudes across time. I'm particularly employing false color spectrograms, which is a distinctive application of colors to the acoustic indexes on the normal spectrograms. With this technique, it is possible to see the distribution of acoustic energies and differentiate the dial patterns of soundscape, that is, the activities of sound-producing communities across days, even seasons. For instance, here you can see different spectral ribbons, which are of a duration of 24 hours to even 5 days long. And by means of these ecoacoustic analysis using spectrograms, we have detected, for instance, bats and grasshopper species, prominently the Cul's pipistrella and the common pipistrelle in Sameiro. And through this data analysis, visualization of the spectrograms and the acoustic application of acoustic indexes, we can also visualize not only through the spectrograms the acoustic energies across time, but also the acoustic indexes itself, namely the normalized different soundscape index, which basically works in a way that differentiates or helps to divide the biophony from anthropophony. Biophony is actually the realm of sound production of all living organisms, whereas anthropophony, it's the sound realm of acoustic energy that belongs to humans, including all their technologies and machines. And with that in mind, and the sound analysis of several images I'm showing now, I close this presentation, this part of the initial presentation of the ecoacoustic methods and the camera trail methods, to pass on my colleagues who will be talking more about the situated human stories, the voices of Serra da Estrela, which are also integral to the sound dimensions of anthropophony.
So as Kwai were saying, besides all this work, we also listen to humans. And I'll begin with a quote that one of the persons that we talked to said that the animals saw many things that we didn't see. If they talked, they would have plenty of things to say. So a bit, Kwai already mentioned the study area, but just to recall that it's in Serra da Estrela, and these are the 6 freguesias or parishes where we've been doing mostly interviews and following the tracks of animals in how local populations and also the institutional stakeholders talk about how animals recover after the fires, and in particular their experiences of fire, meanings of recovery, which are the first species to appear after the fires, animals and also vegetation and their entanglements. And also we try to listen to their own stories about the animals. We've been conducting interviews to various types of actors, institutional actors like local authorities, NGOs, firefighters, civil protection, state security, also those more that are responsible for land, forest, and also conservation, like the national park, natural park authorities, and those that manage baldius, that are the common lands, and also animal carers, veterinaries, sanctuaries, and also besides these more institutional stakeholders, we also in interviewing livestock breeders, beekeepers, hunters, and residents in general. This is a bit of the interviews we already did. We interviewed so far 32 people. The numbers here don't add up because there is a lot of overlap of profiles of actors that are, for example, a firefighter is also a beekeeper, a manager of baldius or the commons is also a hunter and is also a firefighter. And we were thinking if this is a consequence of the population of these areas and also aging. Most of the people we've been talking to are men. And the relationships with animals are quite complex and nuanced. That is not just black and white, like the case of hunters that also talk about animals with respect. Yes, sorry. In terms of the socio-political dynamics, we noticed that there is a generalized sense of abandonment from the local communities, that not just in the moment of fire, but also before and after. It was frequent, this mention to Lisbon and the rest, so the perception of inequalities was frequent. We noticed a lot of tensions with regulatory bodies. There is perception of some of their practice as repressive and antagonist, like the fines. There is also a lack of recognition of local knowledge in terms of during the fires, but also after. Sort of mismatch of practices and knowledge between different players. For example, there was this idea of the firefighting strategy of letting it burn, and then people that stay there didn't want to leave the area, and also felt angry that the firefighters were just waiting for the fire to burn to a certain area before intervening, and they didn't understand why they didn't intervene. Also, there is a recovery plan for the area, and people said that there was no consultation of local players, and it also includes measures that are not directly related to wildfires and also recovery, like the construction of dams. And there are ongoing measures after fires, reforestation and natural regeneration. Some just say wait and see what comes. There are also the creation of mosaics where there is some space for production, the plantation of pines, not eucalyptus here. Also space for native species and domestic animals. Some hunting areas and farmers have sowed cereals for the animals, mostly oat and rye. They call it semeaduras de pão. And also hunting areas, we were also told that they received funds to install animal feeders for wildlife, and some of them mentioned that the animals have returned because of those actions, or also they managed to put, this was more with the wild boar, they put these animal feeders further away from where they normally come, and then they would stay away from the villages, and it could reduce some of the conflicts, but then the funds ended. in terms of experiences of fire, we noticed that there is collective and biographical memory and identity around fire. It was frequent people recalling specific fire events, mostly in the late 80s, 2006, and then this more recent one in 2022. Also the biography of the region and the self. People talk about what it was like before and is now, and the impacts of fire on the construction of biographies and identities. For example, people said that they would stay and defend the village, while others just ran away and left. There is this sense that communities never recover from the trauma, and the memory is still even if it was 3 years ago, is still very alive. Also ecological grief. They mentioned the loss of the green and the landscape that they had, that was always there and they were used to. And one of them said that losing the green is like losing half of life. People also mentioned fire agency. It was mostly during the fire that the fire would jump from one side to the other, and it does whatever it wants. After the fires, there was another disaster, enxurradas, like landslides and flash floods, that complicated even more the situation. And also some references to the role of domestic animals in managing fuel that we mentioned yesterday, but there are few animals in that region. Just briefly about the vegetation that people mentioned, the species we asked about the species that are the first to recover, so that we could bring in the animals. It was mostly shrubs, brooms and bramble, oak trees, the pine trees, chestnut trees, and mimosa, which is very controversial, that people don't normally like them. And there were also very interesting descriptions about how trees burn, or trees and vegetation. One said that everything that smells good burns well. Also, the pine trees, for example, are self-inflaming. Others, like the chestnut trees, is moendo. I don't know the translation, but it's inside. That it's burning inside, and it's more difficult to extinguish the fire. And the animals that were mentioned, we noticed local variations, even if this area, in this specific area, there are variations that in some places specific species had already come back, in others they didn't. We noticed that there is not much knowledge about post-fire behavior. Wild animals and game species, the more frequently mentioned were the wild boar, the roe deer, the fox, the Egyptian mongoose, and the partridge. And Verónica will talk about, we were zooming in the wild boar and roe deer and fox to bring about the stories of the animals in a bit. And also domestic animals, sheep, goat, cattle, and bees. Especially the sheep and goat are very connected to the history of that place. But their recovery is reliant on humans, on providing food. And now I pass it to Verónica. Thank you.
This one works? It does? Thank you, Filipa. So, our task here, so going back to our main, I'll stay here. No, you can stay if you want. Our task here being understanding if our multi-species data, or the data that we're trying to collect, helps us to change the narratives, mainstream narratives, as we described yesterday, about animals in these wildfires and disasters. And here our challenge is to try to trace down these animal imprints in the humans' discourses. So we're trying to render animals visible in these local discourses. And the first thing we should notice in terms of methods also is that we had to push a little bit through spontaneous discourses, otherwise the animals wouldn't just pop in. So it was like the animals were more or less taken for granted. It's not that they're not acknowledged at all. It's more that they're a bit taken for granted. They're part of the landscape. And so we had to push a little bit. And if we push a little bit, then they begin to come out. So there's this exercise of training our own eye as researchers, but also of helping our co-participants to look in a different way, and maybe not only look, but only translate whatever they're seeing or whatever they know about these animals, so that we can then start the conversation. So one of the things that we need to acknowledge is that in these local discourses of these human stories, these human voices, there are many echoes of the dominant narratives that we went through yesterday. So animals are seen as victims, and this happens a lot in terms of the wild animals, the animals that burn, and that sometimes they're seen as fire propagators. We remember a story of sapador. How do you say sapador? Forest sapper that saw a wild boar in flames fleeing from the fire, and as he fled from the fire, he was of course propagating the fire. This is known to happen also with rabbits, as we know, and so these stories remain these animals as victims, and also many burnt corpses found in the following days. Then we have the domestic animals, which is a mix of economic and emotional loss, as we were discussing yesterday. So there is an overlap of roles that these animals play in these lives of these humans living in these communities. But the economic bond is very important, because many of these families also complement their incomes through the products they produce. For instance, over milk with cheese, which is a very dominant activity in the region. And then the narrative of wild animals as threats or pests that need to be controlled, namely, and the most present example is the wild boar. And the narrative is that because there's no one to control them, they will need to be controlled, namely by the hunters. So the hunting emerges as a practice that will be helpful in this following the aftermath of disasters, in terms of controlling a species that is perceived as a threat. Wild animals are relatively absent from these narratives, with a few exceptions, the wild boar and the roe deer. However, we also notice the presence of some counter-hegemonic practices and narratives, and also some counter-hegemonic emergent groups. And one example are the animal sanctuaries. There are some animal sanctuaries that are rescuing animals, not necessarily from fires, but it could happen that one or two of them also have been through a fire, but mostly from companion animals and animals that used to be used in farming, and somehow the farmers left and they don't want the animals anymore. So they're taken in and they're taken care for, and these sanctuaries are enacting new practices of care toward these animals and rescues in general. There is a particular group of off-griders, so foreigners settling in the region from different origins and backgrounds in different stages of life. Some of them retired and then choose Portugal as a place and to spend the later years in life. Others in the mid of their lives, and they're just doing a turn to a different way of living. And these off-gridders, they are committing to a life which is less urban or not urban at all. And their relationship with the animal and the landscape and the environment entails different practices of care. And this is Rosie. Rosie is a 3-year-old goat. She was taken in by one of our interviewees who fits in this last category of building an off-grid life in Serra da Estrela. And she has always lived free range, and she features here, and she also features in some of our camera trapping images while we were trying to catch images of the wild animals. Farmed animals that live nearby also pass by, which already gives us a hint of this multi-animal, not only multi-species, but multi-animal entanglements that we also find and are finding in the Serra. So our task here is, we are now jumping to a more speculative exercise, going back to the question that we are worried with here in this panel, and also throughout the project, which is, can we really build stories about post-fire recovery that are fed by the animals' experiences, that are inspired by whatever animals have to tell? And so here in particular, my task and Filipa's task has been, is being, and will continue to be, to try to get these threads from the human stories, the stories that the humans are telling us about the fires, that can help us to understand these animals' experiences. So we've selected 3 cases, 3 species, 3 animals that we find that come up a lot in these humans' discourses, and that we find that can have this inspiring vibe, so they can inspire us to think through this question of whether we can challenge the mainstream narratives. The first is the wild boar. The wild boar is one of the species that comes more in our narratives and is mostly as a pest, so a species that needs to be controlled, that entails a lot of biopolitics that we were discussing yesterday and today. However, there is, and also as Filipa was mentioning, there are many overlaps in these discourses, and this particular quote is from a hunter we interviewed, and these hunters, they hunt mostly the boar. They claim for themselves an important role for the region in controlling, inverted commas from our point of view, not so much from them, but in controlling a population of boars that could threaten the crops, for instance, in particular the crops. The boars, because they lack food, they come to, as other species do, they come down to the villages and to look for food. And however, we also find in these discourses respect, as we were saying and Filipa was saying, but something more than respect. And so we are trying to follow these leads that we are intuitively grasping. And for instance, here he says, the animals know that this year was good. I've never seen so many acorns and chestnuts as I have this year, and they know when they're going to give birth more or less cubs. The animal's internal management knows how many piglets they should have. As there are more acorns, there are more young piglets. Yes, they know it's a good year. I've never seen a sow with 7. There are domestic pigs with 10 to 12, that's normal, but wild boar are always 4, 5, 3, always like that. So we are speculating, so we are kind of now doing a different approach to the data. We are speculating with the boar and with the hunter whether this felt, sensed wisdom about the capacities of the boar can be something that can help us to understand or approach a characteristic of this species that is insightful into understanding how we can, and they recuperate from the fire. This is an image taken from one of our camera traps. We retrieved them very recently, this month actually, early in May. and it's an ecosystem with oaks at the top of a slope with lichens. So it's a very biodiverse spot. The next species is the roe deer. Roe deers, we were not expecting this. This is quite unexpected for us, but roe deers began to show up a lot in the narratives of our interviewees. And here, for instance, in this quote, and this is something that we all, in our most recent visit there in early May, we came across this again. So we had already come across this in the first 2 visits, and now again, it's these feelings from the populations that the roe deers are invading the region. And so there's this quote for someone I interviewed in the previous visit that says, it seems that there is an invasion of the roe deer in a specific area which is called Manteigas. And this somehow triggered our curiosity. What is it that means this invasion? What's behind this idea of an invasion of the roe deer? And so here we can read, the roe deer causes terrible damage. It does more damage than the wild boar in the chestnut trees. It eats the chestnuts. It only eats the top, curuta, ou cucuruto, também dizemos in Portuguese. And they're very, very, very clever. They're very smart. Fino. In Portuguese we have this expression, é fino. It's a kind of cleverness, which is more very skillful cleverness. They only eat the thriving oaks, the tops. They know that this one goes there and eats it. This one, the roe deer. Then it starts with the head, and if it's a male, with its antlers rubbing against the stem, he'll tear the whole bark off, and it will dry. So this is someone we interviewed in the end of last year, and he's describing that he's trying to reforest a part of his farm with oaks, but he's having problems in doing so because the smart roe deers come and they eat only what's good. They leave all the rest and they eat what's better, what's good. So we call this the smartness of the roe deer. How can this smartness help us to understand the specific characteristics of these species and animals in thriving after fires? And this was taken, taken in a spot with azinheiras, which is a particular kind of oak, Quercus rotundifolia. It's a very biodiverse spot as well, and so it's interesting also to look into the biodiversity of the spot. And finally, the fox. The fox is another species, and that comes quite often when describing which species appear first after the fires. Foxes, just as boars, not so much the deer, but much as the boar, entail contradictory discourses that sometimes are very sweet and caring, sometimes are more like the fox came and ate the chicken. But what we also found is that there is carinho, how do you say? Endearment about the species that we could trace, and here we decided to pull the thread of the friendliness. So, for instance, in this quote, we read, the fox is also recovering very well. So this is something they find. We have here one, she's domesticated. So there's also this connection with the potentiality of a species to become under human stewardship. You bring her food and can even give it by hand. But that one we don't kill. We don't kill. Why don't we kill it? Is it because we feed it by hand? Is it because it comes to be petted as a dog? These foxes were in the village. They were always there. They're always in the rubbish bins. If you go home at 7:30 at night or at dusk, I see them jumping into the rubbish bins, always by the rubbish bins. They know they have food there. So we call this the friendliness of the fox. Can we speculate about how a species is perceived as friendly as a way to understand better how she recovers, or it recovers from fires, and how we can cohabit with that species. So to sum up, we would like to end this presentation by opening some questions rather than closing, because this is what we're here for, to brainstorm. All commentaries and questions are helpful for us. So we leave it with 2 questions. Can animals guide us in challenging mainstream narratives about wildfires? And if so, are these multi-species methods that we're using help us to make this epistemological turn, which is quite ambitious? And we leave you with 3 speculative prompts, which are the wisdom of the boar, the smartness of the deer, and the friendliness of the fox. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Fantastic presentations. We have more or less 15 minutes for comments and questions. I do have many comments, but I think maybe I open to the audience first for questions and then make, yeah? I just don't want to extend myself here. Okay. Right. There's a lot of questions about the challenges, and I'll try to just center what are my comments on that. But I need to tell the audience that I also had the privilege of being with this team in the fieldwork. So I know the spots, and that gives me an insight. I know those photos and the animals, and I met also a few people from the villages that we went across, and it's very interesting. So from the presentation of Kwai, what I would like to emphasize is that this approach brings us to a new world of the animal's perspective. And that is such an important point, I think, from this project, so original. So that just the fact that we go into that other world and perspective of animals, I think it can answer the question that Verónica left, that the multi-species data will bring us to a new narrative, because it brings us a new perspective that it's quite original in scientific projects, in my opinion. And you know, all those, the sounds data just inspire us, because it just triggers our curiosity. And I was just listening to communication experts, how we have a lot of information these days, every day into our minds, but we focus on curiosities. And these things about insects, just it's an immersion into a world that just triggers our attention. I think that is very valuable. Even if it's not a quantitative data, I think that is very interesting. Now, in terms, of course, because I'm a biologist as well, and I work at the Institute of Nature Conservation, I know this area as a natural park. I also think there's some questions here that will entangle finally with the project questions, which is, what did we expect here in terms of species occurrences? What is the ecological story of this study area? For instance, not very so long ago, we had predators there, and they're no longer there, the big predators like wolves and lynxes. And that is one of the reasons why roe deer and wild boar came across as smart or boldness outside, for instance, with the foxes. A question for Kwai from me would be, you presented these different devices, places in different levels from the ground. Would that make a difference from what we can hear? I mean, we're going quite far into what we can hear in nature, but how are these methods limitations? What can we differentiate species, the insects? Okay. The other comment is that I wanted to do is that the multi-species data, just putting together social data and biological data, is in itself a challenge, I think, and it's also not so common. And it's interesting because Verónica and Filipa started their presentation with a statement that tells us that local people actually want to know the perspective of the non-humans, because they say if they could talk, they could tell us stories. So that is a great challenge for the project, to give voice to what the local people want to know from the animals. They know there's this wisdom. It's a kind of instinctive local ecological knowledge. About the actors, I think it's a very strong point of this project to have approached, interviewed a great diversity of actors. And would like to know if the audience agrees with this, but interviewing people, according to some authors, is the first opportunity for people to express their opinion. It's their first opportunity to participate. And I think participation in this theme has been very scarce. So it'd be interesting to face the interviews as a participation opportunity as well. What do they think about that? About the hunters, I think I usually repeat this from my previous experience. Hunters are not a group. It's an activity that connects people, but they belong to different groups. They are socially very heterogeneous, and there's always specialists among hunters. So they do hold a very special ecological knowledge about animals. And not only respect or admiration, but it's a lot of data is there from their experience. One of the challenges that I would like the team to talk a bit, if they want, it's about the challenge of triangulation of data. With your own data, I was thinking about how important it will be for you to know quantitative data on grazing, because people talk about domestic animals' role in fire prevention. The dynamics of the forest fire itself, because they talk about propagation of fire, but we know forest fires have their own physics. It's quite complex. I don't know if it's possible. I don't want to push you here, but it's interesting how all this theme touches in different disciplines. And even in terms of hunting and ecology, the fact that roe deer repopulation could have affect this data. It's external variables that might come across with these invasion perceptions. And finally, I wanted to bring this thing, the narratives about recovery after wildfires, in my opinion, always have two levels, which is according to animals, at the population level, which is usually a concern of ecological people, let's call it, or a concern of ecologists, or people concerned with conservation of an area, of a natural park, and at the individual animal level, which is more to do maybe with the welfare, the awareness that we are in the presence of sentient beings with their own life, with their own agenda. And they're both quite important, but I think they should be approached separately. Do the interests collide between individual and population? It's a question. From the rosy example, I think they can collide. From individual level, like a free-range goat that goes into the space of the wild animals and just grazes. And I found it that the narratives that about local ecological knowledge also mirror that population and individual level. When they talk about the wild boar and their wisdom, like you said, from a biologist's point of view, that can be interpreted as a population dynamics. An individual will have cubs in the number that the resources of the environment will let him, and that is part of the population dynamics. So there's always these two levels. It's interesting to explore, I think. You call them differently. Instead of, the last slide is not there anymore. I would call the roadie a gourmet. Again, it's an ecological characteristic of the species. They are kind of gourmet in what they eat, and that's why they cause trouble to the new trees. The fox, I think, instead, they're not friendly to all groups, and there might be a change between profiles of actors. You try and see that, but they always smart for all groups, I think. And the wild boar, I would call adaptation of wild boar, quite resilient. And I would like to go back to the quiet presentation, how this resilience of animals is the biggest inspiration from your project. And that's it. I'm going to shut up.
Thank you.
Sorry. So, any comments and questions from here in the room? Susanna, please.
This is ICE meeting tomorrow, but we are only one group, so.
We still have the one tomorrow, okay? We still have the one tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm taking notes and I think we're starting already. And I have many notes, so I'll just try to be brief. So first of all, well, it's a huge difference between the presentation that you had like 6 months ago or 4 months ago. It's really we see now, you know, data coming out and starting to think about it. So it's first of all, congratulations for that. The fieldwork is really giving results. I would start by saying that I exactly felt what Margarida was now mentioning as a missing of an ecological story as a start. And for instance, when you talked about the raw deer, I Googled it, and the first website was a Rewilding Portugal, and explaining how it is connected with this project. So I think, and it explains everything that you were saying to us about the species in terms of its new life in this territory that is Portugal, and in general. Precisely, you are talking about what analysing explains so well, which is this new environment in which we are living, which has to do with the species that are more resilient to the damages created by fires, and other problems, other perturbances. So, I would say that. Even so, I understand that because you made these interviews and you want to start by bringing the narratives as they are, but at the same time, I do think that it is important to combine that with the real experience of these people who are living a transformation of their animals as being their friends or not. And in that sense, I do think that just what Margarida was saying, so ecological story of the region and of these animals would help on, then the narratives will come out with a different context. About the narratives also, so a kind of methodological, and I know that you are doing more of a sociological work than an anthropological one, but even so, I would say that at least knowing the age of these people and their story minimally, you know, knowing if they are living this place for 20 years and so they are talking about differences that are feeling in the long term, or they are just newcomers. So these basics of who these people are would make a change on the narratives becoming more, you know, lively and clear. Now, I do think that you did very well in bringing the main question of this project. So you do have this question, you have a strong question, which is how can you learn from the wisdom of the animals? And of course, what seems to be happening is that those animals that will have the reply to that question will be these ones that are more resilient to this new territory, right? And so it seems it is a lot what you already get, what you already have, because you have you're sticking to the questions, so you will be able to find replies, and they will give you many different answers. Now, I would say, because it's something that I'm sensitive to, and I'm much engaged with this discussion on domestication, which is a huge discussion these days in the literature. And so you are naturalizing these distinctions between the wild animals and the domestic animals. I wonder why bees are domestic animals, for instance. So precisely this discussion, and that's it. I mean, I'm just sensitive to it. It's not that you have to follow that. But for me, precisely, it's one of the issues that is coming out of the literature on these topics. It is the need to understand better how these connections are made between what sometimes the literature and the biological literature in Western one was used to describe as two different categories, and looking more on the domestication as an act of assemblages of relationships between humans, animals, and plants. And so instead of looking at these categories as such, because precisely these animals that are now being resilient to this new territory, they are breaking these categories, because some of them, which used to be wild, are now coming to the houses of the people. So it's it would be interesting to look at that aspect analytically. But I have a very specific question, which is why you consider bees as being domestic animals. I was curious about it. Now, another point has to do, again, probably with my anthropological, point of view, even when I'm not doing field work. And as you know, I witnessed and have been much present in the region that was part of the 2017 wildfire, and I knew. And it is a region where I go since I was a child, so I know many people in the region, and I have many conversations. People would come to me to talk about it, right? And it was very strong for me, the descriptions. I know a couple, for instance, that talked to me a lot because they were almost dying, exactly because they were trying to save their animals. So the idea that that animals are taken for granted, it is difficult for people to talk about them. Well, perhaps it's just because it's the moment. But if you try probably to get stories of what happened when the fire took place, you will probably find that many people were trying to save their animals before even their own life. So, which is the stories that I got in Santa Combadão, which is really not for sure. It is for sure more modern, let's say, than Serra da Estrela. So I was, because yesterday you were talking about the absence of the animals in the media, but precisely already telling us that it's a specific classical media, which nowadays only brings what is really news in the first 5 seconds, and then they don't want to know about it. So I would be careful in this idea of an hegemonic narrative and a contra-hegemonic narrative, because I think that in this case probably it's much more of a complex situation. And I would say that in order to get those narratives of the animals, probably trying to get stories of what happened in the moment instead of interviews with questions would probably get to there, because exactly my experience is really of being a very present issue. This issue of saving the animals, and also the absence of animals, not only of the green, but of any animal, after, for long period of time, because they all died or went away, right? So, well, I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. We're running a bit out of time, but don't want to discourage people from... You need to answer. Okay, so just briefly. That's
yes, and also actually we should. There's been the first question was from the online.
okay. So maybe you can read it, because I can't read it from here, and then you answer together.
You want to answer first?
Yeah.
Yes. Can I?
Sure.
Because there are. Thank you. I want to thank the questions. Well, because we're running out of time, we don't have time to all the questions. So just a few notes, because they're really important. A note on this, the sociological or anthropological context. Of course, we do have that. We just didn't have time. So just to say, not only anthropologists do that kind of social context, sociologists do that deeply. So we have all that information, and we'll do, of course, include it. But here, for the sake of the presentation, we didn't have time to make that framing. But that's something that, of course, we consider from the very first moment. And a note, and I'm choosing the questions because we don't have time, and we can continue this discussion tomorrow and later on. So I'm leaving the one on the domestication because it's more complex. The bees are domestic animals because they are raised as just as other domesticated animals for economic purposes. So they're very different from wild bees, and also the species is different. The honeybees, they are the Apis mellifera. It's a specific species that specifically it is bought and brought to those specific settlements with the purpose of producing honey. So it's just like having a sheep, but to produce milk, to make cheese, but it's to produce honey. So this is the criteria we are using. Wild bees, for instance, there are more than 700 species just in Portugal. Many of them are not social at all. They're not social species. Some of them are, others are not. So it's a completely different world. And actually, some of the wild bees, they thrive with fires, as opposed to honeybees, the Apis mellifera, which are very much affected during the fires. Just a quick note, and then all the more complex questions we can discuss later on about animals taken for granted, because I use that expression. We do have, and we did address and still are addressing the what happened to animals, and we have many descriptions of people that don't want to leave the settlements because they want to save the animals. And all the emergency part. However, the project is about what happens during recovery. And so when I meant that animals are more or less taken for granted, it means that they're part of whatever is there during the period of recovery, which actually lasts for long. And this is so we have, of course, stories, and we are collecting stories about what happened during the fires, because we understand that's a very important context to understand what happened afterwards. But we risk focusing on just the recovery or the emergency if we just stay there. So we always have this need and this exercise of bringing people to tell us about what it means to recover, and how does that look like, the process of recovery. So I would leave it here. I don't know, Philip, if you want to say something. We don't have time. Okay.
Well, it's up to us, but yes, I would ask Kwai to read it.
So, comes from Camille. Thank you very much for this presentation. My question, which will certainly open the door to further avenues of thought, I think, and reflexivity, I think it's quite related to what you said, Verónica, particularly methodological ones, concerns the prompts you presented to us. I was wondering what led you to assign wisdom to the wild boar, intelligence to the deer, and friendliness to the fox. My apology if I did not reproduce them exactly as they were stated. were these qualities your own choice, or did the participants in Portugal guide you toward them? To what extent are these attributes grounded in a situated relationality with these three species across time and spaces? Do you intend to challenge or reconsider these characterizations?
Camille, yes. Thank you, Camille. I think this is interesting. If you want to comment.
Shall we comment now?
Yeah, because it relates also to this ecological and it's biological and
Yes,
social.
for sure. And that leaves us also to the comment of the ecological story, which was both yours and Susanna's, which is definitely what we want to do. So that's why we are we include in the team conservation biologist, which will also work with us in this part, and that's a part. But for the sake of this presentation, we selected a small prompt, so to speak. But that's something that for sure will be there. The friendliness, the wisdom, and the smartness are our interpretation of what people were telling us. In this case, these particular interviewees. So as we try to explain, our challenge is try to track the animals in the humans' discourses and try to understand the perspective of the animals. What are the leads, the clues that whatever people are telling us, the stories they are telling us, can help us to understand these perspectives. And from these quotes, we interpret it like this. So the friendliness is a word that we create. It's I wouldn't call it a characterization but it's something. It's an interpretation. So it's, of course, we can challenge it, and it's for us. It has the value of, it's an heuristic value. So our aim is whether it helps us to go deeper in trying to understand whether people have something to tell us about the perspectives of the animals. But if it doesn't, we'll just drop it, of course. So in that sense, we will challenge it if it's not useful anymore. And I agree that we agree that it has to have to do with the social ecological assemblages.
But it is grounded in the sense that it was based on the interactions and the Q&As and the stories told by the people.
No, totally. It is totally grounded in those specific. Those specific quotes are the most are the most telling. So this is what people were telling us, and we are interpreting it through an expression, but it's their narrative, not ours.
Yeah, and
It's your question, is how are humans learning from animals? So you're precisely looking at where are they finding inspiration for becoming friendship together, doing friendship, not humans and animals, right? I think it's really something you are following, which is very giving very truthfulness to your research question, and precisely then you are not categorizing the animals, you are looking at how people are expressing their emotions and feeling inspiration.
Exactly. So this is our epistemological effort also, to try to answer our research question through the narratives of the people we talk with too.
But it's true that comes from the photo trap, not in this first analysis, but once you have maps with the currency and the breeding. For instance, we saw cubs of the wild boar, which puts emphasis on their adaptation, or you said resilience, because they have babies even in recently burned areas. And we saw the fox, and I wanted to say this story. The fox was completely wet. I don't know if you noticed, in the area of mimosas. Mm-hmm. That's how me, Verónica, and Kwai got out of that spot, completely wet as well. So there is information on behavior and the fact that they occur in different habitats that will come across of those characteristics of the species, which might match or not with the narratives, I think.
Just like very quickly to add that it is very interesting what that interviewee was describing us. biologists describe that capacity of a species to breed more or less according to the available food, right? So it's socio-ecological. So this also brings a very important question for us, which is interdisciplinarity, not only among our disciplines, but also with the local knowledges, which is a goal of the project, also to connect with these local knowledges.
Excellent. So maybe now we can go for... Why, do you want to add something quickly so we go for coffee?
I'll try to make it quick, but I don't know. But because you did mention about just to address the vibrations, and if it's possible in this kind of soundscape analysis, ecoacoustic monitoring analysis, if it's possible to differentiate this insect communication or the frequency range, let's say the acoustic niches or the vibrational niches of the different insect groups or even species. In the case of ants, based on what I just briefly play back to you, it is as if you could pick up the cacophony of those sounds. It's quite difficult to tell, right? And because it's communal, so it's not as we are typically, and that's the challenge that I really like. And maybe I can say a few words on that without getting into the let's say the nerdy aspect of working with energy measured in units of frequencies and the interaction with physics, because vibrations, they don't travel through air, they travel through the substrate, and most of the substrate that helped me mediate with these special microphones to capture and record these sounds, not only of ants but of grasshoppers, and also of all kinds of insects, pollinators, which in our minds always appear as bees. There are not only bees, we have beetles, they all pollinate, the ants pollinate as well. It's all vibrations, whether these are ecological services of these insects as pollinators, or in the case of ants, vibrating their bodies or tapping into their chambers because they are enacting alarm signals. It's thanks to the plants and the roots that these vibrations go along, spread out, and are retransmitted and are picked up by the same bodies of the same species. So it's up to them to interpret this language. And what I just wanted to say is that one thing that we, or at least I, want to take on the task is that so far we're talking about actors as humans, but for us animals become actors too in all these fire regions. And it's, I think, this way of not only looking through the lenses of cameras, which is very important because that it's the easiest way to create empathy for us humans, but we need to hear them. We are interviewing them with this ecoacoustic analysis in a way. We are interviewing them, although of course it's critical to say interview because it's not a back and forth. It's more like open mic session, right? And then it's up to us to interpret. And that is the challenge, to cope and let's say match with the stories, the human stories that prompted these situated ideas of smartness, wisdom, and wittiness, right? Boldness, friendliness. I think insects can also show you that without putting that into words. Just by hearing these otherworldly vibrations, it's up to us to interpret. And I think that's the beauty of this, without trying to fix those values, even though it could be the beauty about this ecoacoustic analysis about the spectral sounds in ecologists and fire ecologists, for me, what I'm learning is that it has both quantitative and qualitative. And at the same time, you can recognize a certain language linked to the territory, without trying to put it into the human context, into human, linguistics.
Thank you for such an inspiration answer. Should we now go for a break?